ready to unlock some serious English fluency. We're about to explore a secret weapon that might just change your whole approach to language learning. It's all about the power of listening.
Ooh, I like the sound of a secret weapon. Tell me more.
So we're going deep into a conversation between two English learning experts from the YouTube channel, English Dose, and they make some really interesting points about how listening can be your fast track to fluency.
I'm intrigued. So many learners focus so much on reading and writing. I'm guessing these experts argue that's only half the equation.
Exactly. They say it's more than just understanding words on a page, It's about immersing yourself in the natural flow of spoken English.
Ah, that makes sense. Because we don't really see slang or contractions written down formally that often.
That's such a good point. I actually learned the phrase spill the tea from a podcast. I had no idea what people were talking about before that.
Haha, that's a classic. Now you can confidently use it yourself. And it makes your English sound so much more natural, right?
It does. And speaking of sounding natural, the experts had some interesting thoughts on dealing with different accents, too.
Oh, yeah. Accents can be tricky. Did they say we should just try to avoid them?
Actually, quite the opposite. They actually encourage embracing all the different accents you'll encounter. It might seem intimidating at first, but think of it as training your ear to be more adaptable and comfortable with real-world English.
That's a good way to look at it. It's like a workout for your ears.
Exactly. I used to get so hung up on understanding every single word, especially when I'd hear a really strong accent. It was like I was setting myself up for failure.
That's where the experts suggest a bit of a mindset shift. They say don't worry too much about catching every single word, especially when you're first starting out. Just try to grasp the overall meaning.
Okay, so big picture first.
Yeah. Your ear will gradually get used to the nuances of different accents, and you'll start to pick up on more and more detail as you go.
So no more stressing over every syllable. Now let's get practical. What kind of listening material should we be focusing on? I'm guessing boring lectures are out of the question.
Definitely. The key takeaway here is to choose content that you genuinely enjoy, whether it's music or podcasts or audiobooks or even sports commentary if you're into that kind of thing.
It's got to be something you actually like, huh?
Yes. Make English learning feel effortless and fun, right?
That's a great way to put it. They specifically mentioned podcasts being a fantastic option. What do you think about that?
Totally. Podcasts are so easy to fit into your day. Plus, they cover pretty much every topic you can imagine.
Right. And they give you that glimpse into how native speakers actually talk in everyday life, which I think is so important.
It is. Do you have a favorite podcast you listen to? Maybe one where you learn something new?
Oh, there's this comedy podcast I listen to. And one time they were talking about having a bone to pick with someone.
Having a bone to pick.
Yeah, I had no idea what that meant at first. But I kind of figured it out from the context. I was so proud of myself for understanding that idiom. Now I use it all the time.
That's awesome. That's a perfect example of how listening can help you pick up those everyday phrases that you might not find in a textbook. Now, let's talk about how to make the most of our listening time. Because simply putting on a podcast isn't going to magically make us fluent, right?
Right. What else should we be doing?
Well, the experts emphasize this idea of active listening, and one of their top tips is to embrace the power of subtitles, especially when you're starting out. What do you think about subtitles?
Subtitles were a total game changer for me. It's like having a cheat sheet for my ears.
I know, right?
Seeing those words while I was hearing them helped me decode pronunciations and accents that were really unfamiliar.
It's such a fantastic way to make those connections between the spoken and written forms of words. And then as you get more comfortable, you can start challenging yourself by turning off the subtitles.
Like training wheels for your ears. But what about those times when you hit a word or phrase that you just can't figure out, even with subtitles?
That's when the experts say, don't be afraid to hit that pause button. Take your time, break down the phrase, rewind if you need to, and really dissect what's being said.
So it's about being an active participant, not just passively letting the sounds wash over you.
Exactly. And another great technique they recommend is shadowing. Have you ever tried that?
Oh, yeah, I've heard of shadowing. Isn't that where you basically mimic the speaker, like they're shadow copying their tone and everything?
Exactly. It might sound a little strange, but it's seriously effective for improving your pronunciation and fluency.
I actually tried shadowing with one of my favorite podcast hosts. It did feel a little silly at first, I have to admit. But I definitely noticed an improvement in my speaking after a while.
It's like a workout for your tongue.
Oh.
Now, speaking of workouts, another technique the experts highlight is dictation practice.
Dictation. Oh, wow, that takes me back to school.
It might sound old school, but it's super powerful for improving both your listening and writing skills.
Okay, I'm curious. How exactly does it work?
Well, you basically listen to a short audio clip. It could be anything from a podcast snippet to a news report, and you try to write down exactly what you hear. Then you check your version against the actual transcript and see where you made any mistakes.
So it's like a spot the difference game for your ears.
I love that.
Yeah.
Exactly. It really forces you to pay attention to those little sounds and word choices that you might miss if you're just listening passively. Plus, you pick up on grammar and spelling without even realizing it.
I'm sold. Dictation is going on my to-do list.
Yeah.
Now, what about using technology? Are there any tools or resources that can make this whole listening thing easier?
Oh, for sure. There are tons of resources out there. We really are lucky to live in a time where there are so many options for language learners.
That's true. What are some of your favorites?
Well, there are so many audiobooks that are specifically designed for language learners, and YouTube channels with clear pronunciation and subtitles like English Dose, which we've been talking about. Oh, and there are even language exchange apps where you can practice with native speakers.
So, really, there's no excuse not to be listening to English every day.
That's the goal. Even if you just dedicate 15 or 20 minutes each day, it can make a huge difference. The key is to just make listening a habit, like brushing your teeth.
Totally. I follow a bunch of English language accounts on social media that are all about my hobbies. That's been really helpful.
That's a brilliant idea. It doesn't even feel like studying when you're learning that way, does it? It's all about finding those ways to make English a natural part of your life.
Exactly. And the English Dose experts, they had some really good advice on setting realistic goals, too.
Yeah.
They emphasized that it's so important to start small and then gradually make things more challenging as you progress.
Yeah, don't try to do too much at once, right?
Right. You might get overwhelmed. Like, maybe focus on understanding the main idea of a podcast episode, or pick out a few new words or phrases each day. Just little victories.
Those little victories add up. Remember, learning a language is a marathon, not a sprint. It's a journey.
And listening is one of the most enjoyable parts of that journey.
Speaking of enjoyment, have you thought about what you might start listening to based on everything we've talked about today?
That's a good question. I think I might try listening to an audiobook during my commute. I love reading, but I never thought of audiobooks as a way to learn English before.
That's such a good idea. It's so easy to fit into your routine. And you know what's interesting? The experts at English Dose, they actually recommend putting together what they call a language learning playlist.
Ooh, a playlist.
Yeah, it's basically a collection of different audio that you find really engaging and motivating. Songs, podcasts, even short clips from movies or TV shows.
So it's like creating a soundtrack for your language learning journey. I love that.
Right. And they even suggest putting a few guilty pleasure songs on there. You know those tunes you secretly love, but maybe you're a little embarrassed about?
Oh, I have so many of those. But hey, if it helps me learn English, I'm all in.
No judgment here. It's
Yeah.
all about making language learning feel personal and fun, right?
Absolutely.
Hmm.
You know, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, the shadowing technique.
Oh, yeah.
I'm really interested in trying it out, but I have to admit, it sounds a little intimidating.
I get it. It can feel kind of awkward at first, especially if you're not used to actually speaking out loud in English, but it's worth pushing past that initial discomfort.
Okay, you've convinced me.
Yeah.
I'm willing to give it a shot. Where do you even begin? How do you choose the right audio to shadow?
That's a great question. And the experts actually had some specific advice about this. They recommend choosing audio that's clear, relatively slow-paced, and features a speaker with really good pronunciation.
So maybe avoid those super fast talking podcasters for now.
Exactly. Start with material that you can follow easily without feeling completely overwhelmed. Think of it like choosing a workout, you know?
Yeah.
You wouldn't start with the most challenging exercises right away.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
So maybe something like a TED Talk or an audiobook with a really clear narrator would be a good place to start.
Those are excellent choices. And start with shorter segments of audio, too. Maybe just a few sentences or a short paragraph to begin with.
Break it down into bite-sized pieces.
Yes. And then as you get more comfortable, you can slowly increase the length and complexity of the audio you're shadowing.
Okay, I'm feeling a lot more confident about trying this out now. But I have one more question. How do you actually do it? Do you just listen and repeat?
Well, it's a little more involved than that. The experts recommend breaking down the process into 3 steps: listening, analyzing, and then mimicking.
Okay, let's unpack that a little bit.
So first, you listen to the audio really carefully. Pay close attention to how the speaker pronounces words, their intonation, their rhythm. It might help to listen to the segment a couple of times to really get a feel for how it flows.
Really soak it all in.
Yes. Then you go a little deeper and analyze how the speaker is pronouncing things. Pay attention to where they place stress in words, how they connect different words in a sentence. You can even use a mirror to see how your mouth is moving.
Wow, that's pretty detailed.
It is, but this level of detail is really important for improving your pronunciation. And then finally, you try to mimic the speaker as closely as you can. Match their speed, their intonation, even their pauses and breaths.
It's almost like you're becoming the speaker.
In a way, yes. You're trying to internalize their patterns of speech and make them your own. Don't worry if you don't sound perfect right away. Just keep practicing.
This is fantastic. I am so inspired to level up my listening game now.
And remember, listening isn't just about understanding what's being said. It's about absorbing the music of the language, the way it flows and feels when native speakers use it.
Beautifully put. And on that note, we'll wrap up this part of our deep dive.
It's like you're tuning your ear to the poetry of English.
I love that. But sometimes when I was first learning English, there were these moments where I felt completely lost. Like everyone was suddenly speaking in code.
Oh, I know that feeling. It can be so frustrating.
Yeah, it's like hitting a wall.
It's totally normal, though. The experts at English Dose talked about that, too. They said everyone learns at their own pace, No need to compare yourself to other people.
That's good to hear, because it's so easy to get discouraged when you feel like you're not progressing as quickly as you want to.
They actually said those moments of not knowing can be really valuable.
Wait, really?
Yeah, they're opportunities to grow. Like, those are the times when you're really stretching yourself.
So it's like reframing those frustrating moments into something positive.
Exactly. And they had some cool tips for staying motivated, too. Like, one thing they suggested was finding a listening buddy.
A listening buddy? What's that?
It's basically someone who's also learning English, maybe someone who shares some of your interests.
So you can kind of support each other.
Yeah. You could listen to the same podcast episode together and then talk about what you learned or practice some new vocabulary or even role play a conversation using the phrases you picked up.
That's a fun idea. It's like built-in accountability.
Exactly. And they also mention joining online communities or forums for English learners.
That's a good one. You can get so many tips and discover new resources from other people who are going through the same thing.
It's a great way to connect with other learners because language is all about connection, right? The English Dose folks really emphasize that. Language is meant to be shared, to be used to connect with others and express yourself.
That's so true. It's not just about memorizing grammar rules or vocabulary. It's about using language to communicate and connect with other people.
Right. And that's where listening plays such a crucial role, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. By really immersing ourselves in the way native speakers actually use English, we start to get a feel for the natural flow and nuances of the language.
It's like absorbing the soul of English. Oh, and speaking of absorbing, remember those language learning playlists we talked about?
Oh yeah, those. I love making playlists.
Well, the English Dose experts talked about adding something fun to your playlist.
Okay, now I'm really curious.
They said to include some guilty pleasure tracks. Those songs that you secretly love but maybe wouldn't want to blast on full volume for everyone to hear.
Oh my gosh, I have so many guilty pleasure songs. But hey, if it helps me learn English, I'm not ashamed.
Me neither. It's all about making language learning personal and enjoyable, right?
Right. Speaking of enjoyment, we talked earlier about setting realistic goals. That seems so important for staying motivated, especially with listening practice.
It is. It's easy to feel overwhelmed if you try to do too much too soon.
Yeah, like trying to understand every single word of a podcast episode. That would be way too much.
Right. The experts at English Dose were really clear about starting small and gradually increasing the difficulty. Like maybe just focus on understanding the main points of an episode at first, or pick out a few new words or phrases.
Double steps.
Yeah. And they had this really cool suggestion for keeping track of your progress. They said to keep a listening journal.
Ooh, a journal. I love that. I'm a big journaler in general, but I never thought about using one for language learning.
It's a great way to stay organized and really reflect on your experience. You can write down any new words or phrases that you learn, maybe any aha moments you have, or even just how you're feeling about your progress.
It's like a record of your language learning journey.
Okay.
I'm starting my listening journal today.
Awesome. It's important to remember that learning a language is a journey, right? And it's not always going to be easy.
Oh yeah, definitely not.
Right.
Sometimes it feels like one step forward, two steps back.
Totally. Some days you'll feel like you're making so much progress, and other days you'll hit a wall and feel super frustrated.
Tell me about it. I've definitely had days where I felt like I was back at square one.
But that's totally normal. The
Oh.
key is to be kind to yourself. The English dose experts really emphasize that.
Be kind to yourself. That's so important.
Don't beat yourself up over mistakes or compare yourself to other learners. Just keep practicing, stay curious, and celebrate every little win.
I love that. Celebrate the small wins. It's so easy to forget that sometimes.
It is. And remember, mistakes aren't failures. They're opportunities to learn and grow. Every time you encounter a word you don't understand, you're actually getting stronger.
I love that perspective. It's like turning those moments of frustration into something positive.
Exactly. And you know, one of the most powerful things about listening is that it goes beyond just learning a language. It's about connecting with the world around us on a deeper level.
Ooh, that's deep. Tell me more.
We often take listening for granted, but think about it. It's how we learn new things. It's how we empathize with other people. It's how we appreciate different cultures. It's how we just enjoy the beauty of language.
You're so right. It's like opening ourselves up to a whole world of experiences.
Exactly. And as we keep learning English, let's remember to appreciate the power of listening, both for language learning and for just living a richer life.
Absolutely. Let's listen with intention, with curiosity, with open hearts.
Beautifully said. Ready for the last part of our deep dive into the world of listening.
Let's do it. It's amazing how much we've learned about listening just from this one conversation with the experts from English Dose.
It really shows you how crucial it is for anyone who wants to really master English.
And it's not just about understanding what someone's saying. It's about absorbing the nuances, the way native speakers actually use the language. It's about the rhythm.
Like we've been saying, you're not just learning words and grammar, you're tuning into the soul of English.
And we've gone over so many practical ways to do that.
Yeah, we have everything from podcasts and audiobooks to those cool techniques like shadowing and dictation.
And the key is finding what works for you, right? What makes you want to listen and learn.
Exactly. Following social media accounts that have to do with your hobbies, putting together a language learning playlist, maybe finding a listening buddy to keep you motivated.
It's about making English a natural part of your daily routine in a way that's actually enjoyable.
And that's when the magic really happens. When you're having fun, you're way more likely to keep going, even when it gets tough.
Speaking of tough, the experts really emphasized being kind to yourself throughout this process. Learning a language can be a roller coaster ride for sure.
Oh, absolutely. There are going to be times when you feel like you're making amazing progress, and other times when you feel like you're not getting anywhere at all.
I know exactly what you mean.
And remember those moments of not knowing that we were talking about earlier? Those can actually be super valuable.
Yeah, how so?
They force you to adapt, and they actually deepen your understanding of English.
So those challenging moments, they're kind of like stepping stones.
Exactly. And remember what we said about mistakes. Mistakes aren't failures. They're just proof that you're trying new things.
I love that.
Embrace the stumbles, learn from them, keep moving forward.
Okay, so as we wrap up our deep dive into listening, what's one final thought you want to leave our listeners with?
Remember that listening goes beyond just learning English. It's a skill that can really enrich your whole life.
It helps us connect with each other, learn new things, become better people.
So even when you're not focusing on English, approach listening with a sense of purpose, a sense of wonder. You'll be surprised at what you discover about the world around you.
That's a beautiful way to put it. To everyone listening, keep exploring, keep practicing, and most importantly, keep listening. Until next time, happy learning.